Good afternoon to you all. We will start the press briefing that we decided to organize in the wake of the first coordination meeting that we have organized at Eurojust on the so-called Football Leaks case. It was, as I said, the first meeting that we have organized. 9 countries participated in this coordination meeting, 7 EU member states and 2 third countries. Some countries wished not to be mentioned, so the countries which especially participated in this meeting are France, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, UK, and the Netherlands. Before giving the floor to the judicial authorities and the representative of Portugal, who will make a presentation, give you an overview of the case, I will say a few words on Eurojust, because I'm sure of one thing is that you still don't know what is Eurojust. And this is a shame, of course. Eurojust is the European agency competent for the judicial cooperation and the coordination of the investigations. We are a college of 28 national members, 28 national desks. Our task is to support judicial cooperation and to provide assistance to the national authorities that are leading, that are conducting the investigations in their countries. We're competent for all types of crimes, organized crime, terrorism, all types of crime. Just like Europol, we have the same competence as Europol. The aim of this press briefing is not to go into details, but to give you an overview of this Football Leaks case, to give you a brief overview of the case, and to explain to you how we work together, how we share information, how we take decisions on the coordination of the investigation. I have with me today representatives of 3 countries, France, Belgium, and Portugal. For France, we have 2 prosecutors of the National Financial Prosecution Office, le Parquet National Financier, Jean-Yves Lourgouillou, who is a deputy prosecutor, and Eric Rousseau, who is vice prosecutor and who works in his team. We have for Belgium a deputy federal prosecutor, Eric Bishop, who is competent for organized crime. And as I said, we have for Portugal the national member of Portugal at Eurojust, my friend and colleague Antonio Cluny. So we will start with a presentation in France, and I will give you immediately the floor. Thank you very much.
Merci Frédéric. Tout d'abord, il nous a semblé qu'il était utile de revenir sur les conditions dans lesquelles l'enquête préliminaire Football Leaks avait été ouverte par le parquet national financier. Alors pour cela, il est utile.
In the French prosecutor's office, it might be useful to go back to the 2nd of December 2016. On that date, the consortium of journalists represented in France by Mediapart published a series of articles as part of a file called football leaks over time, which was based on a number of documents that had been sent in by a source named John. These press articles brought to light a number of suspect dealings linked to professional football, particularly particularly looking at the role played by players' agents. There were financial advantages that were uncovered by these articles, particularly attempts to conceal certain income streams received by players. And under French law, these were criminal offences. Several players who play in the French Championship are French tax residents, and they were involved. The complexity of this operation and the fact that it was not very transparent meant that it was all aimed at covering up revenue, and this was seen by one of the first articles published by Mediapart. This was income linked to image rights of the players involved. And there was also a transfer of a player from a Spanish club to a Portuguese club, and with a hidden transfer of over 1.5 million euros, which was there to decrease the official amount of the it was decreased to about half of that as the official payment. On the basis of these initial articles that emerged, on the 16th of December 2016, the French Financial Investigations Unit opened up a preliminary investigation looking at money laundering and aggravated tax fraud as part of an organised criminal operation and taking part in criminal dealings. And this preliminary investigation was undertaken by the Financial Unit, the Central Office for Combating Tax Fraud and Fiscal Offences, sitting alongside me today. So where are the investigations at today? About 2 years further down the line since the investigation was opened. On the 21st of December 2016, the French journalist who was behind these articles that had emerged was questioned as a witness by the French Financial Prosecutor's Office, and that confirmed that several months had been spent working on the basis of millions of documents that had been provided by the source, and that they had been able to verify the authenticity of these documents. Now, these the journalists in question did not reveal their sources, nor did they give us access to these documents, and we were not in a position to identify the source either, but they specified that these sources, or the source, wished to cooperate with judicial authorities, and they provided us with information that allowed us to contact the source, and that's exactly what we did. Alongside that, we were also working on other judicial investigations, and in May 2017, there was a search carried out, particularly in the Paris Saint-Germain Football Club headquarters, and also the homes of several players who were concerned by this investigation, who were the subject of the early articles that had been published in the weeks before. There were a number of other activities that took place in 2017 and 2018, particularly mutual requests for mutual legal assistance, or MLAs, that were sent via Eurojust, which allowed us to identify or to get a better idea of what system was being used to cover up part of the revenue concerned. Recently, for example, we received an answer that was sent to us by Portugal to one of those letters of request that had been sent to the Portuguese authorities. At this stage, the investigation has also allowed us to rule out a number of players who were initially under investigation, and we had seen that these players in reality had indeed declared their corresponding revenue in France. And now we're pursuing our investigation with regard to other players. And in recent months, there have been a number of major developments in this investigation that my colleague is now going to present.
As has just been said, starting from 2017 and also in 2018, the source approached our office and offered cooperation, but but in conditions which would not put in jeopardy his safety and ensuring anonymity. The fact we didn't know this source's identity nor place of residence made the effective implementation of cooperation made it rather difficult. We only had press cuttings or press articles which are based on the documentation, but we did not have the documents which allowed us to see what these documents contain. And for us, it was very important to be able to solidly base our process with solid proof, robust proof and evidence. A new series of articles appeared, as you well know, in the case of a subject christened as Football Leaks 2, always based on articles by this anonymous source. These articles, some of them at least, interested our French investigation, especially articles linked or put under suspicion, named to very important clubs in the French league. The Portuguese press, at the same time, if you like, uncovered this whistleblower who was known by his alias John, but they published his photograph and his identity. And John was apparently a person called Rui Pinto. The source at the time hired a lawyer, and once his identity had been revealed, he decided to be a witness. He, despite the threats which he actually stated threatened him, he was he bore witness in front of our office. He was a free man. There was no, if you like, arrest order against him. During the hearing, he gave us two digital supports. He was arrested in Hungary in January as a result of a European arrest warrant issued by Portugal. A few days later, we got a new, if you like, a digital tool with information, which is handed to our body, the PNF, by his lawyer. Throughout November and December, we obtained digital information, which we had to analyze and study. Let me make it clear right here that in French law, the principle of freedom of evidence does allow investigators to use any evidence before the court if it has not come from illicit actions by the courts or the investigating magistrates. But any evidence which comes before the courts can be used in that sense. Now, in January 2019, last year, these digital supports were analyzed by an IT expert to see whether they could be used as evidence later. The documents before the French courts is quite considerable. A first analysis allows us to evaluate 12 million files made up of email inboxes and many other documents. First analysis after the keywords allow us to confirm that the data could be valuable evidence in the framework of the French investigation. So we have set a series of keywords which appeared in our procedure, and we have several positive results. But it is also clear that this data could also interest other judicial authorities for ongoing investigations, or they could even lead to investigations being opened based on all this data. So, following on information given to us by the source I mentioned, and thanks to the analysis of the documents which we had, we could clearly state that there are many other elements of information. We only have 10%, so well over 80% of the data are not yet in our hands, have not been handed over to the French judicial authorities. And the point of this coordination meeting, and as has been said, was the first one organized concerning the Football Leaks case. This coordination meeting had as a purpose to if you like, take stock in detail of what has been done in France in terms of investigation and inform our European colleagues, and also see practically how it could be shared by how France could share all the documents which it had in its possession, and also see how the information that is not yet available could be made available. Let me highlight that the difficulties surrounding this are the application of specific legal rules in different countries, in particular on admissibility of evidence and the communication of criminal or proof and evidence in criminal trials. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Jean-Yves. Thank you, Eric, for this presentation of your investigations. I shall now hand the floor to Eric Bishop.
Dank u wel, meneer Baap. Goedemiddag, iedereen.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Baab, and everyone else. My French colleagues have given you full explanations from the side of the fiscal authorities in France. My colleagues started to indeed point out certain data and information. Our participation is based on our concern and our attention for these practices in the football leagues. We are especially interested in the data that have been collected and that are available to indeed find out what these malpractices are in the sport arena, which are indeed keeping us all occupied for quite a while now. We are very appreciative of the fact that our French colleagues have offered us the opportunity to, together with them in the European arena, take the vanguard in these cases and files. And we furthermore found that many other countries are going to accompany us in this strive to move forward. What is very important is to inform you of the fact that I can indeed witness here a very strong willingness with many countries who wish to attack this issue together in a joint way and to utilize the legal and practical opportunities that football leagues offer us, even though the situation and the whole legal issue is quite complex. We have discussed very many aspects, and we have arrived at conclusions in this coordination meeting today, conclusions which are confidential, and I cannot share them with you. What I can say is that from the Belgian view, we have found ways forward to make information available, to exchange information, and to indeed include various spear points from other countries in our analysis of our cases, so that we have found again the additional value of Eurojust and coordinating with the other member states. I may say that Belgium has a lot of attention for the possibilities offered by football leagues. We have indeed seen Panama Papers and other comparable dossiers which have been brought forward in comparable ways. I believe it is not more than normal that we invest our energy and efforts here as well. And I would like to conclude by saying that I will leave The Hague with a very positive feeling and impression, and I would like to thank, in very first instance, the French desk and the French colleagues for their initiative, and I wish to thank all other countries today at the table for their positive attitude to continue on this road. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Eric, and I'd like to hand over to Antonio Pleni, who is the national member at Eurojust for Portugal.
Frédéric.
Thank you, Frederick. Thank all our colleagues here. I shall be very brief. The Portuguese investigations mentioned in this coordination meeting basically cover cases of tax fraud. They stem from the conclusions of audits carried out by the Portuguese judicial authorities. These audits started in January 2015, before the work of the appearance of the this is collective of journalists mentioned here. Cooperation between the judicial authorities of different countries is solid and robust and will take due account of the circumstances of each case and the legal differences in our different countries. I must apologize, but I cannot talk of the Portuguese investigations ongoing because they are sub judice or under professional judicial secret. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Antonio. And thank you very much for taking the floor and speaking in French. As you will have understood, this was a first coordination meeting, and the objective of this meeting, like any other meeting taking place at Eurojust, is first and foremost to share all of the information available between the various countries involved by the investigation itself and who have their own investigations underway. Then at a second stage, the aim is to look at possible avenues for cooperation between the different countries and their investigations. Today's meeting was mainly about sharing information. And as has been said by Antonio, there is this difficulty that rears its head occasionally because of the differences that we may find between the legal systems in the different countries involved, particularly when it comes to rules on admissibility of evidence in the courts. We are now available. We are on hand to respond to any questions you may have.
I'm Mike Corder from AP. Mr. Lourgueil, maybe you could just clarify for me, because it wasn't entirely clear. You talked about having 12 million documents, and then 80% of them you haven't yet been able to access, I think. Could you just run through those numbers for me again so I can get them clear in my head? How many documents do you have? How many have you been able to access and examine so far?
Well, in fact, we received our expert technical report scarcely a week ago. So, and the judicial legal experts will hand over the evidence they consider that can be used. We've carried out key word tests to ensure that the content was really relevant. I mentioned 12 million, not documents, but files, which means that there are probably more documents than that. Nonetheless, out of these 12 million files, and I'm not an IT specialist, but there are a number of files which are technical ones. So we shall have to, if you like, go through it with a fine-tooth comb to center our efforts on the really most useful ones, the ones that are really useful. We're talking maybe of 2 million files with documents which can be used. A file can be a document, but it could include 10, 20, or 100 documents in a file. So those are the documents we have in practice. Now, the nature of the documents in the file, well, it'll be no surprise if I say that they are contents of inboxes, of email inboxes with attachments. So there are emails, but also documents attached or drafts attached, and we shall have to study it with IT tools to really fill up our dossier and see whether there could be therein documentation which could be of interest to other countries' investigations. Thank you.
Merci. D'autres questions?
Thank you. Any other questions?
Est-ce que la Belgique
A question for Belgium. Have you already met Rui Pinto? Have you already received any documents? It's a question for Belgium.
on n'a jamais rencontré personnellement ou en
No, we haven't personally met with Rui Pinto, and we haven't received any documents from Rui Pinto either.
Von hem ontvangen. No documents, haven't met him.
My name is Michael Wulzinger, Der Spiegel. Mr. Luguyu, I would like to ask you, what would it mean for you, for the prosecutors in France, if Mr. Pinto was extradited to Portugal? Would it affect your investigations?
Alors pour que ça soit...
Well, to make it absolutely clear, there are two different procedures. One for which Mr. Pinto's arrest was requested by Portugal, which is a Portuguese case, a Portuguese procedure, and France has nothing to say about that. We have no opinion on that. And then there is another procedure, which is the French one, which we've been talking to you about, and which refers to making full use of the documents. It would be difficult for me to comment on the Portuguese, strictly Portuguese investigation. I cannot give you any complementary information. What is of interest to us is to be able to access in the best possible conditions to the data which is pending and which has not been made available to us. Our meeting today was convened so that all countries concerned could discuss the matter together. But these two procedures I have just mentioned, which follow two different tracks, they follow two different procedural tracks.
The case of the arrest warrant that has been sent by Portugal to Hungary had not been examined at the time of this coordination meeting, because that is a completely separate investigation. It's a case that is exclusively being dealt with by the Hungarian and Portuguese judicial authorities. From our point of view, for the time being, this other case has nothing to do with the criminal investigations and the targets mentioned here during this coordination meeting. Cooperation between judicial authorities in different countries will always exist and will always take into account the circumstances for each case and the judicial systems in place in each country. All of the investigations, and I think that we're essentially talking about tax fraud, which is a very separate case from the other, which is why the Portuguese authorities that are in charge of the European arrest warrant have not been convened to this meeting. All of the other cases make it essential to talk to the other countries represented here, but the case of the European arrest warrant is a completely separate case with a different target.
Merci, Antonio, pour cette réponse.
Thank you.
Thank you for your very clear answer. I'm from Radio France. You say that there are probably 2 million files which can be made use of. Does that mean that the 3 support which you received were individual, or was it just the whole mass, which means that the making use of them is complicated? Or during this meeting, have you started to discuss the countries to which each document could be aimed at, could go to, or haven't you yet reached that stage? Well, when it comes to the number of files, what I told you was that that 12 million files is the grand total, the absolute total. But, and I'm not an IT specialist, let me repeat that, but amongst the files, there are many files which are exit-type files or files which do not contain useful documents, or they're I think in principle there are about 2 million useful files, in inverted commas, which have contents of mail inboxes or attachments or other documents, which could be useful to us, to our investigation. But most of these have been, if you like, analyzed, so there's no problem can access them. Now, your second part of your question, I cannot enter in the details, but one of the magic things about Eurojust meetings is at the end of the day, we realize that when you have several judicial authorities around a table, we start to look at subjects or problems, like in the football leagues. We become aware that there are names which appear in our investigation, appears in other investigations. And this has been a very useful meeting. It has allowed us to match up items and which we have and which match with in results of investigation of other countries. So all the information we have will certainly feed into investigations open in other countries. At this stage, you will understand that I cannot tell you more than that, because there are current investigations ongoing and active and open, and I cannot speak for other authorities of my own. Next question. Amongst the countries, were there some which have not opened an investigation? I can say that there were countries where there were open investigations and other ones. Well, let's see. You know that the judicial systems do vary quite a bit from one country to another. And there can be administrative investigations which are ongoing, which can become legal or criminal investigations, or investigations which have been opened but which have been put in abeyance because there was lack of information. There were certain countries which do not have formal investigations open, but will certainly contemplate starting or commencing an investigation. There's some which we could open and which will, based on the information we have, some countries could open an investigation. Because to open a criminal investigation is not enough to have press articles. That does give us guidance, they are pointers, but we do need hard documents, hard evidence, which can provide us with further leads and could stand up in court, obviously, and to move forward slowly but surely. And amongst the countries, you're the only ones that have documents.
Oui, ça je crois.
I think that it is clear, insofar as I know, that France is an entry point, if you like, to these documents.
Une dernière question.
One final question.
Hello, it's Jeroen Wester from NRC Handelsblad. I had a question to Mr. Frédéric Baap. To what extent will this information be available to prosecutors of, for example, Switzerland or Croatia? Can you say something about it?
Eurojust est un instrument.
Eurojust is an instrument. It is available to the judicial authorities. And that means that Eurojust is not there to communicate information in and of itself to other countries. It's up to the other countries to make that request to the countries that happen to hold the information. And of course, we are there to act as an intermediary and to provide our support and allow the investigations underway to be coordinated.
Eine letzte Frage an Herrn.
A final question for Mr. Clooney. I was slightly irritated to hear you say.
Ich bin etwas irritiert.
I was slightly irritated because you were saying that there is a clear distinction between the case that's being dealt with in France and the international arrest warrant that has been issued by Portugal. As far as I have understood the arrest warrant from Portugal, we're talking about two institutions, Sporting Lisbon and another, which are also part of the Football League's reporting. So I'm just wondering how you can distinguish between those two cases. Well, firstly, because they are already divided. They've already been split because the facts are different. We have investigations underway into tax fraud that have been opened in Portugal, and so there are some investigations underway there. And then there is another investigation which is there to try to investigate a case that we believe is very different. The second case is on extortion. Thank you very much, Antonio, for that final response. And with that, we're going to conclude this press briefing by thanking you all for having attended. Thank you very much for taking part.